أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. I'd like to welcome everyone again from the Al-Falah community and those who are also visiting from other communities to watch our live stream. Inshallah, this week we have a really a very good speaker. Ustad Tariq Ameer had come earlier to Al-Falah to talk during the Listen, Learn, and Reflect program, in part one of that. So for those of you who viewed that part, you're familiar. For those of you who haven't, inshallah, you'll be in for a very nice treat as well. Ustad Tariq Ameer is someone who has, he was born and raised, I believe, I don't know if it was in New Jersey, but in the US. His family converted to Islam. And he's someone who's a student of knowledge. He's traveled the world learning for a few years, and more recently he teaches at Safina Society in New Brunswick, and he's the chaplain at the Northern State Prison in Newark, New Jersey. Ustad Tariq is someone that I've known for a while, and mashallah, he's really he's just a great person to be around, and he's very knowledgeable, and inshallah we should all be looking forward to a very nice and enlightening talk from him today.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما فاستك حديث كتاب الله من خير الحديث حديث محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثات بدع وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار يا أيها الذين آمنوا إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair, Khalid. One of the things that we learn from our teachers is that if someone says things that are not true of the reality of who you are in terms of praiseworthy things, that you say Ameen, as recognizing that inshallah it'd be a dua for you, and that's when may you obtain unto those praiseworthy characteristics that they may have mentioned in regards to you. So inshallah ta'ala, today what I wanted to actually look at is because in the last 3 months or so, things have gotten to be pretty hectic in terms of everything that's going on in our society. Before we started the live stream, we were having the constant conversation that seems that is going to be the topic for a while in our context about COVID-19. Khalid had mentioned the previous program that we did together when we were speaking on the issue of race. Then we have other issues that are coming about, and then also the effects of all these things happening. And so I felt that it would probably be beneficial for us to look at this concept that those in the professional world, in particular those who are engaged in different aspects of counseling and these type of things, refer to as emotional intelligence. And the way that I want to look at it, of course, coming from an Islamic perspective, but also looking at it from the standpoint of not just emotional intelligence in terms of our interactions with other people, but also our interactions with our own selves, is that sometimes we, unfortunately, we don't really understand, or we don't realize the amount of anxieties and the amount of grief and amount of issues that we're carrying within our own selves and the negative effects that it's having upon us. Or sometimes we don't recognize the signs of these type of things in those who are around us. In particular, if we're in positions of leadership or authority or whatever the situation may be, oftentimes the people who, receive kind of the worst of us sometimes are those who are closest to us. And this is part of the one of the realities of the statement of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and of course him being the best example for us when he says, khayrukum khayrukum li ahli, that the best of you are the best of you to your families. Wa ana khayrukum li ahli, and I'm the best of you to my family. And the whole aspect of that is that, generally speaking, those who are closest to us are the ones who are able to see us in our more true form. That, oftentimes when we're out in the world and we're interacting with different people, some we know, some we don't know, some who are close to us, some who are distant from us, and so on and so forth, we will tend to kind of put up the presence that we feel that we're supposed to have. Whereas with our families, oftentimes, they're the ones who kind of receive the brunt of our true feelings. And so, dealing with this aspect of emotional intelligence is, how do we become a complete human being in all of our aspects? Because, for example, sometimes, we misinterpret some of the statements of the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as being as being a means of us kind of not taking responsibility for different things in our lives. So kind of one of the famous examples that I like to use is the statement of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he says that, that's nikah, that's marriage is half of the deen. Marriage is half of your religion. What I often say to people is that if you are half a person before you get married, you shouldn't get married. Meaning that I'm not saying that the Messenger of Allah did not say that. What I'm saying is that our understanding of what he meant by that can often be misconstrued, because sometimes we have this image that, okay, marriage is half my deen, so, my spouse is going to complete me. And the aspect of it is that your spouse is not going to complete you. Your spouse can be a means of support, a means of care and concern for you, but your spouse is not going to be the one that completes you. You have to work on your own self in order to complete your own self. Similar to the statement that's, sometimes attributed to Ali ibn Abi Talib anhu, when he says that, man arafa nafsah arafa rabbah, that whoever knows himself knows his Lord. Is that we have to come to the point of mastering ourselves. And this is, from that famous statement of the Messenger of Allah about the aspect of the jihad al-nafs, the jihad of the own soul is the greater jihad. The struggle against our own souls is the greater jihad, because we are complex human beings. This is one of the realities that we face as human beings, is that we have a lot of complexities. And a part of our complexities is the different emotions that we have and learning how to navigate them. Because in this regard, a lot of times we can go to either one of two extremes. One extreme being the extreme of that we just overly indulge in our emotions, meaning that our reactions, our responses are just completely based upon our emotions. We don't necessarily fully, comprehend a situation in its totality. The other extreme is that we completely ignore our emotions, so that everything just gets pushed down or disregarded or is kept, at bay, so to speak, and we never have an opportunity to really reflect upon it. Both of these are, dangerous, positions to be in. And this is part of the aspect of Islam being a deen as wasita, a deen that is in the middle, that we try to take a middle ground, when we're dealing with all these things. So, for example, if we look at the life of the Messenger of Allah, sallam, is that when he had death happen in his family, it wasn't as if the Messenger of Allah sallam didn't recognize the humanness of himself or the humanness of other people, but he kept it in a balance. So, for example, when his son Ibrahim, radiallahu anhu, passed away, is related that the Messenger of Allah had tears that came to him. He cried when his son Ibrahim passed away. When his wife Khadija radiallahu anha passed away, even years afterwards, there are narrations that mention that, tears could come to his eyes when he used to hear the voice of her sister because it reminded him of Khadija. However, the Messenger of Allah, he still acknowledged that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ultimately in control. And it wasn't a situation of him denying the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or him being displeased with the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it was acknowledging the human aspect of himself. Is that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's given us these different emotions, but he's given it to us in order for us to maintain a particular balance. In the science realm, they refer to as a homeostasis, that we can be a balanced human being. And so trying to come to this, aspect of being a balanced person, again, with ourselves and with the communities that we're engaging in. And again, given the context of what we're going through right now, in particular with the COVID situation and also the aspects of police brutality and these type of things, people are dealing with a lot of different types of emotions that they're going through. And how we interact with them and how we interact with ourselves to make sure that we're engaging in this in a healthy way. That, not everything is meant to just, be suppressed and bottled up. So again, we try not to go into extremes. So we don't go into the extreme that, we just tell everything and anything about our lives, to anyone. But at the same time, we don't go to the extreme as well, where we just hold on to it and just, let it fester. Because again, both of these are things that can be dangerous to the human being. The Messenger of Allah, sallallahu, he would confide in he would have his companions confide in him. They used to come to him and tell him about the different issues that they were going through. And the Messenger of Allah, he acknowledged their situations. He acknowledged, what it is that they were feeling, what it is that they were going through. Such that, for example, when the young man came to the Prophet and he asked him, can you make fornication permissible for me? The Messenger of Allah didn't go straight to, oh, that's haram. That's haram. How could you ask me, something that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made forbidden and so on and so forth. He acknowledged the situation that the young man was in. And what did he do? First and foremost, he told the young man, come sit close to me. He established an emotional connection with him. He established a connection of closeness. And he engaged him in a manner that he was able to receive. And this is, this aspect of understanding where people are coming from. Because many of us may have been in a situation where we were dealing with some type of, difficulty that, we were trying to understand what is the situation. And when we go to someone, possibly they more or less, put us in a situation of this, oh, this is just a test from Allah. Or, that's, it could be worse. Or you should be happy that, this is your situation and so on and so forth. Now, the thing is that, this may or may not be true in a person's situation, because ultimately only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what he does with his creation. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what he does with his servants. However, for us as, human beings, we can go back to the Messenger of Allah, another statement from him is where he says, La darar la darar, that there be no harm, no reciprocation of harm. Is that, when we're interacting with individuals, that we interact with them with this in mind, that, we're not trying to cause this individual harm, that we're trying to be in a situation where we can be a support system for them to help guide them back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if that's the role that, we're being put in. Or it could be a situation where we just want to, be a means of support for them from the role that we have. So if we're coming from the role of a brother, a sister, a friend, a parent, a child, whatever our role may be, being there to support that person in the situation that they're in, and not necessarily automatically, rejecting them or, putting them in a situation where they feel that they're, the way that they're feeling is not validated, or they feel that, the way that they're feeling is not, correct, is not appropriate. people are going to go through different situations in life. There may come a situation where a person, for example, and I'm just mentioning this a hypothetical, where a person may have some type of, doubt or some type of questioning about things that are happening in their lives. And how do we, deal with that person to try to help them in that situation? So understanding the different situations where a person is coming from and trying to, best assist them in that. And it's not necessarily an easy process. And this is why I mentioned that, I wanted to look at this concept, from both angles, the aspect of our interaction with others, but also our own interactions with ourselves. Is that, many of us, unfortunately, from, either cultural norms or, just our understanding of religion or whatever the case may be, sometimes, we don't treat ourselves in a healthy manner, whether that be mentally, physically, emotionally, or whatever the case may be. And so what that creates is that it creates an aspect of imbalance. And so when you have that imbalance, it's easy to pass that on to other people. So, for example, we don't know how to show, appropriate emotions. I can speak for myself, growing up, the only emotion that, I knew that was quote unquote appropriate for me to show, especially outwardly, was, anger. That was like, the emotion that I knew I could, show and not have, any problems with that. But the thing is that a lot of times when people express anger, a lot of times it's deeper than that anger. Meaning that, for example, outwardly a person may be expressing anger, but inwardly they may be experiencing grief, or they may be experiencing a sadness that they're trying to deal with, or they may be experiencing an aspect of loneliness or whatever the case may be, but they just know how to express it through anger. And so what happens is that, we just deal with it from the standpoint of anger, but we never actually address what is really going on. We never get to the roots of the issue that we're facing. And again, this can be very problematic, going about, our daily lives. So for example, there have been many people who have lost people, during this time of COVID-19. And, because of the nature of the virus and the nature of the society, limitations that we have, people sometimes have not been able to truly grieve or to truly have some sense of, I don't want to necessarily say closure, but, some sense of, being able to, deal with this situation in a healthy way. So, how do we handle that? How do we deal with that? Do we just, kind of just keep it to ourselves and, try to go about it? Or do we try to process it in a healthy way? One of the things that I'm doing right now is that, one of the things, I'm taking classes right now. And one of the things that we're doing is exercise called expressive writing, where it's just, writing about certain things that happen in our lives, and in a way where we can truly be true with our emotions, such that, we can start to see, what are the reasons why we sometimes feel the way we feel or do the things that we do, so that we can start to recognize, what are the factors that are contributing to how we go about our lives. And this is again coming from the standpoint of the prophetic model, is that, the Prophet ﷺ, he was sent so that he could give us, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, that he, innaka ala kulikal azim, that you are upon a tremendous character, meaning that he embodied the uh the aspect of the possibility of a perfect human being. And of course, when we say the aspect of a perfect human being, us putting in the clause human being, meaning that we understand that the human being, we're going to have our deficiencies, because the only one who is truly perfect is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But in terms of the level of perfection that a human being could reach, the Prophet ﷺ was the one who reached the epitome of that. And so his example for us was in that regard. But unfortunately, sometimes we don't necessarily fully embody all of the prophetic sunnah. Is that oftentimes the prophetic sunnah is limited to what is outward and what is in regards to the legal aspect. So, we know, what's considered to be quote unquote sunnah dress, and, the sunnah way of, having the beard and the hijab and all these type of things. But, we don't necessarily fully engage in the sunnah of the aspect of ihsan, the aspect of the spiritual portion of the human being that we're supposed to engage in. And so this is something that we want to make sure that we are engaging in, so that, we can have a heart that is sound. This is, part of the aspect of what we're striving towards, is to have a heart that is sound. However, if we're dealing with this imbalance of not having a healthy, emotional relationship with ourselves and with others, then it's going to lead to this imbalance, and our heart can never truly be sound. And if we don't start to recognize these things, then it can lead to more and more issues. So for example, even the aspect of, the social injustices that are taking place, have we been able to truly process, how we truly feel about these things? Have we been able to truly, come to a recognition of, where we fall in terms of what is taking place right now? Because these are all important for us on an individual level. And then on the community level, being able to put ourselves in a position that we can understand where other people are coming from. And this is why also, for example, one of the things that, the sacred law has been mentioned in the aspect of the maqasid of the Sharia, the foundational principles of the Sharia. That's one of the things that the sacred law has come to protect, is the aspect of a person's lineage. And the reason why that is because your lineage has an effect upon who you are. Because even if you just think in particular your most direct lineage, your immediate family, that has a tremendous impact upon who you are and how you view the world. So for example, many of us, we may have been in situations where we may have had a parent that did something or say something, and as a child, it deeply affected us, but we just learned how to cope with it in some type of way. And then once we get to be adults ourselves and we're interacting with our own children, a situation happens, and all of a sudden we're responding to our children in the same exact way that our parents did, that we knew that when we were children, we disliked it when our parents did that to us. But why is that the case? It's because that is what we learn. That is what we know. So that turns back to be our default. And so from the standpoint of Islam, we honor our parents, but at the same time, it's not to say that our parents may not make mistakes. And the thing is that we need to acknowledge these type of situations so that, again, we can start having a healthy relationship with ourselves and with others. Because these are things that are going to impact, even our interaction with our Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because if we have this imbalance, this is, part of the cause for some people that leads them to question, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the qadr, the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because they've had all these different situations that's happened in their lives, they haven't had someone or the proper means to be able to process these things. It leads them to start questioning, well, how can Allah allow for all these things to happen to me? And so on and so forth. So recognizing this and coming, to a position where we can actually engage this in a healthy manner. And again, the reason why I'm emphasizing this is because if I were to, give my own personal thesis on the matter, I would say that, this has not been fully addressed in the community. And there are many different reasons for that. One of the things that, if I were to be honest, in this particular regards, is that sometimes we fail to realize what roles people play. And so what do I mean by that? Is that sometimes, and this is going to vary from community to community and situation to situations, but, for example, sometimes, a person may be going through some type of particular struggle, some type of particular difficulty, or whatever the case may be, and the one and only person that they always go to is the imam. Now, the reality is that many imams, and I'm not taking away anything from the imams because they have an important role and they, are, functioning to the best of their capability. However, not every imam is trained for every type of situation. So, for example, we go to imam because we have some type of emotional need. However, you know, the imam is not necessarily equipped to address that particular emotional need. So for example, one of my teachers, what he used to say is that sometimes people will come to you with a fiqh question, but it's actually really not a fiqh question. There's something deeper and more eternal that they're going through, but the only way they know how to express it is through a fiqh question, through a question of law. But it's something much deeper. Like, for example, a sister comes to an imam and she says, for example, can I marry a non-Muslim? Now she's phrasing it as a fiqh question. And for many of us, we already know the answer to the question from a fiqh perspective and so on and so forth. But what is not necessarily said is what is deeper going on in the situation. That this question may come from a situation where the sister has, a particular situation that's happening with her parents. That, it could be a situation where, she's been, trying to get married for, years, with a Muslim, and it just nothing has ever worked out, and so on and so forth. And so the fiqh is one aspect, but, there's a possible deeper situation that's going on here that needs to be addressed. And so knowing, who to go to and when, and even for those who are positioned, particularly when people come to us for these type of situations, knowing, where our limitations are and where they're not, and knowing and trying to be able to address these things, I think is very critical in our communities. Is because not every question is going to be a question that's, geared for the imam. The imams, just like, in all different other disciplines, people have their specialties. Imams have their specialties. Counselors have their specialties. Chaplains have their specialties. Muftis have their specialties. Lawyers have their specialties, so on and so forth. And just as I wouldn't ask a lawyer about dental work, there are certain people that you're not necessarily going to ask, in regards to, emotional, things that are happening. And the thing is that this is a real issue. People are having stress, situations taking place. We have, the issues of substance abuse in the Muslim community. We have the issues of suicide taking place in the Muslim communities. We have the issue of, different types of abuse, including physical, mental, verbal, so on and so forth abuse. We have the aspect of, self, the term that's used in counseling of self-violence, when people are actually, harming themselves, being too hard on themselves, and so on and so forth. All these things are there. And if we don't deal with it, or if we keep it, bottled up, it's just, contributing to the problem that we're facing. So to allow for us to come to a point of, being able to effectively, come to an understanding of these situations, in particular in the Islamic context. So for example, for right now, I'm, doing my MDiv in Islamic chaplaincy, and much of it is in regards to the aspect of counseling and dealing with this concept of emotional intelligence and things like that. However, much of it is coming from a Christian perspective. And so, this is something that, I'm seeing that, we need to start, putting the Islamic narrative in there, because we have, certain things that are specific to Islam. We have certain, norms and certain expectations and, certain practices that we have in Islam that are specific to these type of situations. So, these are things that, other traditions, have acknowledged that, are needed. And, I feel that, this is something that as us as Muslims that, we need to, start to be heavily involved in this as well. Because these are things that are having a great effect on our communities. So, this aspect of looking at the emotional intelligence based upon the Quran and the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu, because again, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu, he was an example for us to be a complete human being, to try to reach our greatest level of insaniya, so to speak, the greatest level of being a human. And so, inshallah, I think I come to my cutoff point. I don't want to go over time, but inshallah ta'ala, anything that was a benefit was only from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and any mistakes that I've made is only from the weakness in myself. Sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So thank you very much, Ustad Tariq, for a beautiful lecture. I know we usually have some questions and answers from the community. I'd like to start off by kind of saying, I know this is the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he came as a perfection of character, right? And obviously that is our goal, is to follow the sunnah to the best of our ability. What have you seen in certain societies or certain communities in the area that you feel is kind of one of those areas that we as a Muslim ummah need to improve on? One specific characteristic that I think we need to kind of improve on. I know there's a lot probably, but which specific one would you suggest kind of as a nasiha for us, inshallah?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to limit it to one, but I guess one of the is the aspect of the concept of a ummah in terms of the society. And what I mean by that is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he mentions that he's made us into nations and tribes, but in particular, if you want to come, because for the most part, we're it's going to be coming from a Western or American context, is that we're in a situation where we are completely diverse and completely we have a lot of unique things within the community. And so this aspect of making it a situation where people can feel comfortable when they come to the masjid. And that's what I mean from this aspect of ummah, in the sense that when I go to a masjid, I don't necessarily have to feel that because I don't necessarily fit the demographics in particular, that I feel kind of isolated, because many different people, when they go to the different masajids that we have, and I hear this in particular from converts to Islam, is that they just don't feel comfortable, like and it's part of the kind of like one of the natural aspects of human beings, like we gravitate to those who we feel more comfortable with. But actually, from the standpoint of the sunnah, is that if you're in a gathering, you're supposed to make room for everyone that comes to that gathering. And like part of the adab of even a gathering is that if you have a group of people who are speaking in one particular language, and another person is there and you don't understand the language, that you don't speak in that language that the person doesn't understand. You have this openness. And so I think that is one area that we can try to work on, to try to make our masajids feel more inclusive. It's not necessarily the easiest thing, because you can't necessarily always know the different needs and situations, but part of this is trying to be more mindful of where people are in their particular position. And what I mean by that is that, for example, sometimes we get so accustomed to how we feel like, for example, the masjid should be done and how the etiquettes that a person should have in a masjid, but sometimes you may have someone who's only been Muslim for a week, and like they're coming to the masjid and they don't know the different things. Like I had a meeting not too long ago, and one of the imams was mentioning how someone who had just converted to Islam was talking about his girlfriend. And like the community, like all the community members kind of just like was like, oh my God, like because normally we understand that the aspect of having a girlfriend is not permissible, but the imam was saying that he just kind of dealt with it in a different type of perspective, but he was able to deal with it in that different perspective because he knew the context. He knew that this was a new Muslim. He knew that he's just coming into Islam and so on and so forth. So understanding that context that people have, and not necessarily quick to go to just the fiqh aspect of it. So I guess you could say, as one of my teachers would say, don't fiqh this up. This aspect of, yes, we understand what the law says, but there's also a context that we have to take in consideration.
Jazakallah khair. That's a very good point, and especially I think for our community, being that we are one that we're in the process of building our physical space, that's something that inshallah we should all keep in mind, that when we do have the physical space, to be cognizant of all of our brothers and sisters, right? Because anyone who's Muslim and comes to the masjid and proclaims La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, they are our brothers and sisters, and we should be cognizant to be very inclusive, as a very inclusive community, and inshallah may that be how our community is. I know the last time we had you on, you had mentioned something, kind of changing gears here, but last time you had mentioned that there are volunteers, that you are looking for, people to come and volunteer, especially to help our Muslim brothers and sisters who are in the jails. Can you talk a little bit about that program, what the volunteering entails? I know there's some people who had expressed interest. Maybe other people who didn't get to see your first presentation should be able to inshallah tune in and learn more about this program.
So there are a number of prisons within the state of New Jersey, particularly male facilities, at least 10 or so. And so all of them have volunteer programs that they conduct. Right now, because of the COVID situation, all volunteering has been held off. However, they all have a number of volunteer programming that they normally do. And as long as a person is able to pass a basic background check, then they can volunteer at any facility. They would just have to, probably the easiest way of doing it is to find out what facility is closest to you or is most convenient for you to be able to go to. And you can just request a volunteer form to go and volunteer. And the aspect of volunteering is that it doesn't necessarily have to be religiously based. It can be educational based and so on and so forth. When I was talking about it before, I was speaking from the standpoint of religion because I am a chaplain in one of the prisons. And the reality of it is that my facility in particular is that the largest single religious body in the prison that I work at is Muslim. We have over 300 Muslims sometimes coming to Jummah on Friday. However, I have no Muslim volunteers at this point. There are no Muslim volunteers that we have right now. And so, if anyone wants to volunteer, like I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be at the facility that I work at, but, they can look to see what facility is most convenient for them to go to, or, what is most convenient for them. And they can receive a form to volunteer. If a person is having some difficulty, with that or anything like that, they can reach out to me. You can reach out to me at my email that I have at my office. It's tariq.a.ameer AMEER @doc.nj.gov. I know that might be a little bit much, but yeah, you can reach out to me at that email address, and at bare minimum, I can provide you the forms for volunteering. And the thing is that I would also say that, I would hope that people would have a little bit of patience, because the process of being cleared for volunteering can be a little bit of a lengthy process, because there's a background check and, different things like that. So it can take a little bit of time. But, once you're cleared, you're able to come and volunteer. And generally speaking, the volunteer hours are either in the first thing in the morning or possibly mid-afternoon, like, from like 1 to 3, or in the evening, like from 6 to 8. But again, it's going to vary from facility to facility.
So Jazakallah khair. Inshallah, I know that there's at least one or two people who are very interested in that. And inshallah, people can reach out on the email address. We'll try to get that up on YouTube as well. So we did have one more question from one of the people from the community. Their question is, are we born with emotional intelligence? And how can one increase emotional intelligence in terms of religious orientation and mental health?
So that's a good question. Are we born with emotional intelligence? Um, the Prophet ﷺ, he told us that everyone is born upon the fitrah. So you have a natural dispensation that you're born with. However, I would say that, in generally speaking, our aspect of emotional intelligence is from our learned experiences. And so our learned experiences are going to dictate, how our emotional intelligence forms as we become older. Because again, a lot of the aspect of how we deal with emotions, how we understand emotions and things like that are predicated upon the experiences that we have and what we see around us and so on and so forth. This is why, for example, in many counseling classes and things like that, they have you do what's called the family genome, whereas basically you track like your three levels of your family tree, and you actually look to see kind of like what influences those different people in your family had upon you. So in order to help to develop aspect of emotional intelligence, a person really has to be honest with themselves, which oftentimes is difficult unless you're being driven in that direction, or guided, should I say, in that direction. So, having this aspect of, understanding, what type of personality that you have, and, understanding, where those things are coming from, what triggers, have been in your life that have kind of made you who you are today. And so a lot of times with emotional intelligence, particularly with us, like, for example, the Prophet ﷺ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as he said in the Quran, that, وَوَجَدَكَ ضَالًّا فَهَدَى, that, we found you in a state of, I don't like to necessarily use the word lost because the interpretation is different, from the standpoint of English and Arabic. But essentially, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that we guided him. But the aspect of it is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, at all times of the Prophet's life, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has been the one nurturing the Prophet and his tarbiyah and his growing. And so, because we don't have that same relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because, none of us are messengers, for many of us, we kind of have to do it kind of retrospectively, whereas where we're kind of looking back in order to go forwards. Because for generally speaking, in the early stages of your life, you don't really understand things that are going on, and it's only once you become an adult and you can start to kind of look back, as the saying goes, hindsight is always 2020. You can start to look back and start to understand where it is that you came from and how that has affected you presently, and then also start to initiate things to make your future healthier. And it's not an easy process. I mean, like I said, right now I'm engaged in it, basically because some of the classes and things that I'm doing right now. And so it's not an easy process. However, just like any other type of, procedure that we may go through, is that the procedure itself might be difficult, but the way that we feel after the procedure is done, is better than, how you would be prior to doing it. So, it's a long process, but it's worth it. The way that I usually kind of compare it to is kind of like exercise. Whereas that many of us know the benefits of exercise, but it becomes a difficulty for us to go out and actually start to do exercising. But we understand what the benefits are. So just like our physical bodies, we take care of by exercise, our emotional and spiritual bodies, we also have, emotional and spiritual, exercises that we have to engage in order to try to, get that healthy emotional and spiritual stability.
Jazakallah khair. No, that's a very good point. Um, Alhamdulillah, I think this is a very good talk. There's a lot for us, inshallah, to reflect in this talk as well about. Alhamdulillah. I think that's it for the questions. If you could just close us out with a dua, and inshallah, that will conclude this week's live stream.
Inshallah. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتوب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. اللهم اغفر للمسلمين والمسلمات والمؤمنين والمؤمنات أحياء منهم وأموات يا أرحم الراحمين يا أرحم الراحمين يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام تباركت يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. اللهم رب الناس اذهب بش اشفي وأنت الشافي لا شفاء إلا شفاءك شفاء لا يغادر سقما. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. الله سبحانه وتعالى أعلم هو حسبنا ونعم الوكيل. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم.
I think you're muted, Sidi Khalid.
Sorry. Assalamu alaikum. Sorry for that. Jazakallah khair again, Ustad Tariq Ameer. We had a very nice and enlightening lecture. Inshallah, may Allah let us use this lecture as guidance and nasiha for us. I hope that under that for everyone that joined this week, inshallah, please come back again next week for our next live stream. We'll all be looking forward to that. Jazakallah khair, and hope that everyone has a healthy and safe week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.